Hey everybody, we are talking about a trace and transfer method today, and talking about how in a drawing one class, often people would think that using any kind of tracing mechanism might be cheating. But I just wanted to point out that a lot of our illustrators, our designers, a lot of the artists that we love on Instagram and Pinterest and so forth, they use this method. So I just thought I would show you how they do it digitally really quickly. But then talk about how we can do it analog with our graphites and papers and so forth. So I'm in Procreate, but this would work on Illustrator or Photoshop or any of the softwares, drawing softwares, painting softwares that you could use. And I had imported a portrait. A minute ago, I had done a real quick kind of like fast contour continuous line and did it in a second. And then I did it again, just in a different tool. So you can just see how quickly someone could make a drawing this way and kind of get the proportions right and so forth. My pen tool broke, so I was using my finger and I did it in a second, but you can see kind of how it works. So we're going to take this method and then apply it to a analog drawing that we're going to do with graphite. So here in the last video, I had taken graphite transfer paper that I got at an art supply or hobby store. You can also coat the back of your paper with vine charcoal, and it releases like an agent of transfer material as well. But I just thought I'd use this because I had it in this little cleaner. And then I taped it down and I traced out all those super, super darks, the mediums, the lights, and I tried to think in value shifts, 100s, 90s, 70s, 50s, 30s, zeros. Not really trying to draw individual features, but where those values shifted. I'm going to keep it taped down just in case I want to reference it later. But that was what we created in our last drawing, or our last video. And I had used a 0.5 Pentel mechanical pencil. And because I taped this down, I have another copy here that I can use. So let's get started on the value. When we started the line drawing, I had started with the parts that to me were not that important, and I did it so that I wasn't, I could build some confidence that way. And I think I'm going to do the same this time, starting here. Often I would say start with the most boring, the negative space, and work your way up to the positive and the more important things. But I know I want to keep this white. So I'm not going to touch it, and I'm just going to start back in here. Some artists will start with the really intense stuff first, but I need a little confidence building. I'm going to take a sheet of paper, it's extra print, I didn't like the size for the composition, and I'm going to use it as a way to not let my hand drag over the surface. And I'm going to switch, this is a 9, I have a 7, so the 9 is thicker, the 7, the 5 that I used was the finest one. And I have a 2B and a 3B. But I think I'm going to start with the, because I'm doing a big part, I'm going to start with the 9 and we'll see how it goes. I don't want to use my erasers at all if I don't have to. So I'm going to try and just work additively. And I want the drawing to be a little dreamy. So I'm going to try not to show a ton of brush strokes, but when I do brush strokes, pencil strokes, I want them to have a consistent kind of feel to them. And I'm definitely using the tooth of the paper here. I can see that my pencil has got a little sharp point, so I'm going to kind of use it to flick out a little piece of hair there. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. And I'm not going as dark as the photo yet, but my hope is to build up to that. And while you can't tell on camera what I'm looking at, like if I'm looking at the photo or if I'm looking at the drawing, I'm trying to kind of split it 50-50. Again, I'm going to kind of roll this so it's up on a point and give this just a little bit of detail. So I want to look at the content and then come back here And look again, I'm gonna go a little darker just so I have a little bit of contrast as I move through. In the photo, it's pretty flat in this area, but I'm gonna build it and kind of work through. And I can feel confident to come into these darks. Again, I want this to be pretty sharp, so I'm gonna kind of roll this up on a sharp tip. It's these little tiny areas of detail that will kind of bring it to have a little bit more resolve. Again, this is just kind of my first layer. And I'm really trying to think about my pressure, especially as I'm building a larger area, so that I'm not really showing my brush strokes too much and really using the tooth of that pretty paper. This is a Arches watercolor paper, so it's a really pretty high-end 100% cotton rag paper. So I'm getting close to the eye. And I noticed when I was doing the drawing, I couldn't really discern between the hair and there, and I'm okay with that. That would be kind of what we would call chiaroscuro, light out of dark. This photo is not chiaroscuro because chiaroscuro would be where this was all into darkness, but this little moment right here kind of is. I want the drawing to just be real soft. When I bring the value up to the lines that I laid in, I want those lines to go away. So it's just these value shifts. And I might come in and put some harder edge lines in a little bit, but those I want to control and craft. The main thing I want to do is try to get rid of them at first. So keep looking at my image and seeing where those darks go. And it kind of jumps here, so I'm going to come back up here. It's always good to move around a drawing, then you're not kind of getting caught in one spot. I'm going to make this a little darker. I'm feeling pretty confident with these values so far, but I want them to be darker, so I will come in and use some different tools in a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of like a open and closed right here. So I'm going to kind of make it thick and then not fill it in right there. So if you have it real thick and heavy all the way around, you can even see already like it's a little darker, then it's lighter, darker, or lighter. It helps it from feeling like a Lego helmet a little bit. So this is where it got lighter. Might be running out of lead on this one. Yeah, I think I am. I'm gonna shift for now. No, that's a 7, but it's too soft, so, or too narrow. So I'm gonna shift for a minute, especially while I'm in the hair. I'm gonna take a 2B and we'll see how we do. So I don't know if you remember us talking about before, but the different densities of the pencils, the H's are the hard ones, and so they're gonna make a lighter mark. And then your B's get darker and darker the higher the number goes. So a 2 is like a pretty early dark and pretty safe. So I'm gonna see how we do. I'm just gonna lay it in here and make sure it kind of can match that mark. Yeah, seems okay. So I'm really using the tooth of the paper because I think it's a pretty paper. But I could also, and I think I might in a little bit, use something a little more linear in the face, just so there's like a kind of hatching mark, but we'll see. So a lot of the beginning of this drawing is kind of the not super important stuff. But that's kind of giving me the confidence to build up as I go. Kind of layering it and building up a little. Yeah, I'll go darker in here in a bit. Maybe I'll do it now. Again, I want to not show my marks too much. So I'm kind of using like a scribble or a cross hatching, so it's hiding my mark, so I'm not like kind of see it coming together. So it's pretty important to know your different tools to see, you know, if you want to use a darker pencil or a lighter one. I might come back in a minute with like a 4 or a 6 in the hair, but I just don't want to go too dark too fast. Kind of do a little line open and closed in a couple spots, so it looks more like core cast shadow there. Again, I'm still spending a lot of time looking at the photo. Trying to figure out what I was drawing here. That's like a nice little shadow that comes in, but not much, so I'm going to lighten it up here. So now I'm kind of out of the hair, coming in to the forehead. And it's just like a slow buildup of the material. It's pretty dark right here. I kind of want to keep the integrity of that earlier line. Yeah, it's coming along. Look and see what's happening here. It's still pretty dark, but there's like a little bit more light. That's gonna help it, again, not kind of feel like a Lego helmet. I might turn this into a line. That little bit of like open, close mark. Get rid of that edge so it's just a value shift. That can look kind of like a bounce light, or what they might call a hair light if it was like a TV, or if you're 3D modeling. Again, I think I'm going to make this all quite a bit darker. I'm going to shift to a narrower pencil, which is my 7. Get a little bit of this detail, but not too much, because I haven't done a whole lot in other places, so I just want it a little bit. I'm still really looking at the photo. That's a little too much. I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and clean it off, and I'm just going to try to pick that off a little. And I don't want to disturb it, and I don't want to like make it schmutzy, so I'm just trying to lift it. Yeah, I pulled off a little bit. I can rework that later. Using a lot of eraser and smudging in your drawing is a technique that can totally work, but I often think that the drawings, they'll look a little more sophisticated if you slowly build them in these additive layers, and then use that smudgy mark making very sparingly, if at all. Okay, and you kind of see what's happening in that forehead spot. So there's like some shadow here. Just barely. I want to make sure that that line from my original transfer tracing kind of goes away. So I'm going to pull that out. And if I were to switch pencils, it would really change everything. Or if I were to switch paper, I wouldn't have this bumpy quality. And I'm going to try to just get a little flyaway here and there. So it's like it's closed, it's a harder edge here, then it opens where a little white of the paper can come in, the value shifts, and then it gets harder again. And that is what's going to make the viewer's eye kind of move around the picture plane in such a way that it feels a little more believable. It helps activate the way that our peripheral vision kind of works. Okay, I'm going to look here and see what's happening. I'm going to start to draw the beard because it can help me figure out where the dark goes. Yeah. This gets pretty thin and then opens back up. This was that hard part where the ear kind of came in and out. I'm gonna kind of layer and darken a little bit and then put a little bit of info, a little birthmark there, in through here. Again, I might have got a little much, so I'm gonna try and pull up some. That's why these kneaded erasers can be fun, because they don't disrupt the mark making. So again, I'm really looking at the photo again. Trying to be a little bumpy on the edges, so I'm using the tooth of the paper and trying to be a little not messy, but softer, so it kind of feels like a beard. Kind of following my map around. If I ever kind of get lost, I can you know, try to find, like, okay, if this is the middle of the chin, where are the darks going? I'm kind of going back and forth between using the writing grip and then the overhand when I need to kind of shift the way I'm making the mark. You know, I think because I'm on video, I don't turn the paper around much, but if this weren't on video, I might be turning him a little more. This is where I got a little too curvy. So I'm gonna kind of try to slow that down. Okay, so I'm gonna darken the hair some more. So just another layer. So that I can come in and do this stuff where it gets to that next space. I think this needs to be darker. I want it to be a kind of softer key value drawing. So it's not really intense, too intense. So I'm trying to float the pigment so that it doesn't really show the mark, except maybe sometimes where I was trying to look a little bit like it's some shifts in the hair. I tried to get a little darker here and a little lighter here. Okay, let's make this darker so that I can shift that up a little. I'm gonna switch to my 3. I might, at this point, use my sandpaper just to flatten it off a little so I'm not getting a super hard edge, but I've got enough graphite. And I think if I use the 3, I can bump up this dark. I don't think I want to go, for this particular portrait, as dark as a 6 or a 9. So I'm just kind of slowly layering and building. Try to make that like a hair though. I don't have a lot of detail in this eyebrow, so I may come back and put a little bit in here in a bit, but just a little bit of the 3 on this side. So I'm really just trying to use that pressure. And trying to get rid of those lines that I made. Looking at the drawing. Kind of fading it out a little. It's almost like I'm floating the material on top. Okay, I'm getting closer to the features. Soften these areas. And like making simple shapes like a sphere or a cylinder, it would have a highlight, middle, and a dark. I'm trying to keep true to that, highlight, middle, dark. So I'll just keep building some of these darks, and that's what's helping make the face start to feel like it's more volumetric. Okay, a little darker here, getting close to the features. I'm really looking at the contours of the light spots. I might pull a little of that pigment out. Again, trying to kind of lose the edging that I had created. With line and trying to make it happen with a soft value transition. I shift back to the 2. A little more layering. Here comes. So there's like a little line work, but not too much. I'm going to shift to this mechanical pencil. back to my 7 here. This is dark under the teeth. So again, I'm trying really hard not to draw the teeth. I'm just trying to draw where the darks are. Again, that kind of slow layering. Go back to my 2. And I just keep bouncing around the drawing so I'm not getting caught on one spot. I'm really trying not to judge myself or make decisions about it yet. I think it's too soon because it's not all coming together, and I'm gonna need to shift the value weights of everything anyways, so. Oops. This is an eraser that would go in one of these, but it's out of the, maybe I'll use one of them. I just got a little too far in that tooth. Ah, oh well. Yeah, I'm just gonna let it go. All right, here go some eyes. So I'm gonna get a little more linear and a little darker out of the gate here. Again, this is gonna be a fairly fluffy drawing just because of the nature of the paper. I'm going to open and close this line a little, and this gets pretty dark in here again. Over in here, but I'm going to do it with a different pencil. Try to draw that pupil. I'm going to hold this away from me in a minute and make sure I've got it. I'm going to leave that little spot for a highlight. I don't have a lot of data in my photo, but I'm going to try and draw these in a kind of inward radial manner to kind of mimic what would happen with the muscles in the eye. Come back and rework. Let's do this eyelashes. The inside of the white has a little shading. Open and close that line again. Darken there a little bit. So here's where I might try to use and show a little bit more mark making. So it was all fairly fluffy in here, and now once I get to some of the features, I might try to show a little bit more mark. I don't know if this paper is going to let me though. Shift to my 2 again. Sometimes you have to find like where the pencil is at, if you need to sand it, or so that it feels good on the paper again. There's a little shading on the eyelids. And I'll, like I said, I'll come back and kind of darken everything. But it's this kind of slow layering. So while we use the trace and transfer to get the proportions correct, it is still pretty challenging just to navigate the values and the mark making. So doing exercises like these is helpful just to practice that material application, because now you're not really fighting with the proportions too bad. Take this 7 and do this other eye. I'm going to do this like darker mark and really make sure I am faithful to my original trace. This is where things can go amiss. Looking at the photo. There's a little shading in here. There's that highlight that I want to mimic again. And then again, I don't have a whole lot of data, but I'm gonna do that kind of inward radial mark again. Not that this paper is letting my mark show very well, but if you want to have a really smooth surface, you would use the hot press surfaces. Conceptually, you can think of that just as the like the iron would be ironing it out more. Okay, I'm gonna actually kind of lean back and make sure that they're kind of not cross-eyed here. Is that a little bigger? I'll probably, once I pull back and change all the values, I may reshape and do some different things. I'll go back to my 2. Again, if I wanted it a lot bolder, which I'm kind of going for like a softer approach, but if I wanted a higher contrast and a little bolder, I would be jumping in and using my 6s, my 4s, my 9s, and I still might grab those for the hair and so forth. Kind of changing the direction of the mark a little. Again, trying to just obliterate that original tracing so that it looks less like an outline and a sticker. This photo I have is not stellar, so I'm just kind of giving a little bit of detail. So it feels like eyebrows. I might shift to my 7. I don't know if you remember, but this was in the other eye was where I had kind of come in and used more of a straight line kind of mark, shifting the mark a little bit. But still really trying to float the material. I'm gonna go back to my 2. Got too dark, I'm gonna pull it up. So I'm being really careful not to try to disturb the mark making when I use the kneaded eraser. Just kind of pushing on it a little bit. I'll come back to the eyes. Kind of fade this over. This might be where if you wanted to try to use like your blending stump or your eraser to try to move the pigment that you could, but I really am going to try very hard on this drawing not to rely on that and just use the pressure of the additive material to try to make it kind of fade out. I just want it to have that little bit of mark making in it. Maybe. I don't know, it's a little bumpy. So I kind of removed it a little bit. Getting down to the little last details here, and then I'll take the paper off and then we'll look at the whole thing and then basically redraw it. So it's like we've put one kind of under layer and then we'll reevaluate and see what needs to be shifted or changed or altered. Darker on the side of the nose. I'm just pulling up a little bit, try to make that cheek pop out. I'm going to go in with a number 7 mechanical and try to sharpen that a little bit. So it's that really like slow buildup of the material. Back to the 2. Just removing a little. Like I said, I kind of want it to be a paler value drawing. And I'm just trying to follow my outline. But I know I'm going to have to kind of edit it as I go. Getting closer. So I think in a second, I'm gonna try and just lay out the rest of the beard and a little bit of the shirt, and then we'll take a break, and then I'll come back and we'll really revise it at that point. Darker. I'm mostly just looking at lights and darks, and I have not decided about if it looks like the photo or anything yet. Like that is gonna come next. I'm just trying to follow my map. A little bit of layering still. And I will turn the video off in just a second, and we can meet back when I try to edit and revise the drawing. Definitely need to work on his eyes. Maybe we'll darken them a little before we turn off the video. Oops. Come on now. And the last thing I want to do before I turn off the video is I'm going to use the 5, and I think I'm going to just do a little bit of shading on the shirt, but I really want to just use it as like a pretty line that fades out. I'm going to do a kind of open and close where it gets a little thicker. I'm going to really craft the line, and thinner, thicker, thinner. So I'm letting a little bit of this value shift bleed down into the shirt. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I just want it to be pretty linear. Yep. Just kind of trying to give it a little more weight. I'll see. I might put some, I'll do some shading in his neck. We'll do that before we. Turn off the video. So while I drew a pretty heavy line there, I'm working really hard to match it in value so it doesn't look linear. I tried to draw it hard so it was real crispy on the shirt though. I'm gonna put a little darker in the beard. Like I said, we'll come in and really darken some stuff. I just put a lot of pressure right there in the beard because I wanted it to separate. Yeah, maybe I can do a nice line work on the t-shirt edge. Anytime that you can do like a tiny little detail on something easy, like a t-shirt edge, it pays off in spades because it makes the rest feel more resolved. That was where our microphone was. We're kind of making that up. Okay, let's leave it there for now for this part of the video. Then we'll come back and we'll fix and edit and rearrange some things and push some darks and make it really come back into a crisper contrast. Okay, we'll see you soon.